Metro Plan TAC meeting. So I'll call the meeting to order. I'll turn it over to Rosie to do the roll call. Rosie, please. Oh, Rosie, I think you're on mute.
There yes, thank you. Sorry about that. Jason James.
Present.
Dan Dunno.
Present.
Rick Barrett.
Present.
Brendan Foley. I should ask, Jason, should we have you on here instead of Brendan still? Or
no, you can keep Brendan on there.
Okay. Chris Kessler. Not present. Jay Christelman also does not appear to be present. Dan Folk.
Here.
Jeff Bauman. I thought he was here. Is he not here?
No, Jeff is here. Jeff Bauman just called in. He's on the line.
Okay. Andrew Eichler.
Here. Present.
Ed Stillings.
I'm here.
And we have Metro Plan staff. Jeff Mildeck.
I'm here.
And David Wessel.
Present.
Me, Rosie Ware. And we have Mandia Gonzalez, our new transportation planner. And others in attendance. I see we have Keith Christian.
Yes, I'm with Kimley Horn.
With Kimley Horn, thank you. And we have Michael Grandy, also with, we didn't hear you. Was that Kimley Horn?
Yes.
Thank you. And Jason James with ADOT. Did I miss anyone? Okay, that concludes my roll call. Chair James.
Thank you, Rosie. Appreciate it. Next item, public comment. Rosie or Miles or Dave, any public comment or anyone that wants to make a public comment at this time that's on the line?
Chair James, I will say there was no public comment recorded ahead of time. And now would be a good time if anyone had any public comment, but I don't think that is the case today.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, let's move on to the next item. Item D, the approval of the October 27th minutes. Know that the updated revised minutes per Anne's comments has already been is in the meeting minutes that we have. Was there any other comments or any other revisions to the October 27th minutes from anyone on the TAC today? Going once, going twice? Okay, hearing none, looking for a motion to approve the October 27th Metro Plan TAC meeting minutes.
Jason, this is Ann. I move to approve.
And looking for a second?
I'll second that motion. This is Dan.
All right, thank you. Motion by Ann and a second by Dan. All in favor of approving the October 27th TAC meeting minutes, please say aye.
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 And all opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. All right, next item, going on to the consent agenda. Miles, was there anything on the consent agenda that we have to discuss or anything of that today?
Mr. Chairman, there's not, but I would like to take this opportunity to formally recognize and welcome Mandia Gonzalez, Metro Plan's new transportation planner. We shared with you last month that she was going to be joining us. And now she's here and you can see her in the room. So welcome, Andy. I'm very, very glad to have you on board.
Glad to be here.
And then I think that
Excellent. No, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
that's it for the consent agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. And welcome, Mandia. It's good to have you on the Metro Plan team. So excellent. All right, moving on to general business. First item A, the ADOT Highway Rail Grade Crossing Action Plan. I see that we have Kimberly Horn, Michael Grandi, and Keith Christian on the line today. So I will turn it over to you two for the presentation.
Thank you, Jason. I'm gonna try to share my screen here. See if we can get it to work. All right. All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Great. All right, so again, I'm Michael Grandi with Kimberly Horn, project manager for this State Highway Rail Grade Crossing Action Plan project being run by ADOT. The ADOT project manager is Heidi Jakob, but she asked me to present this today. Really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to the Metro Plan TAC about this important statewide project. So what is SHRAP? That's the acronym we're using for this. So it's a plan for improving safety at the public highway rail grade crossings. And what that means is by highway, the way the Federal Railroad Administration defines highway is any public road. So that could be a local road, a county road, state highway. So any kind of at-grade crossing that's open to the public and currently in use. There's about 700 of those currently in Arizona. So why is ADOT looking to develop this SHRAP? Well, it's obviously safety is paramount. So definitely a top priority for ADOT to try to improve safety on all their facilities. But there's also an added federal requirement that by February 14th, 2022, all states have to have a statewide rail crossing action plan in place. So we're working towards that. And the goal is to come up with a bunch of improvements that can then be programmed into various programs such as the Section 130, which is funding specifically for rail crossing, but it could also be leveraged for other funding sources. The overall goal is looking at safety, not only for vehicles, but also for pedestrians, bicyclists, any mode of transportation. We're looking to reduce the number and rate of incidents of both passive and active crossings. And by passive, we mean ones that have like static signs and pavement markings potentially, but not anything that gets activated as the train approaches, whereas active crossings are the more traditional gate arms, flashing lights, bells, all that kind of stuff. So we're looking at both types of crossings and hoping to reduce crashes involving all modes of transportation, including trespassers. Although just to clarify on that point, we're not looking away from the crossing at trespassing that's going on, like 1,000 feet up the rail, but just right at the public street. Are there pedestrians, ducking under the gate arms and those kinds of things? And then if there are locations that have multiple crashes, looking for, is there some kind of pattern going on there that we can help address? Most of you are probably familiar with this information. These are just a couple of snippets from some available maps showing the existing rail lines in the FMPO area. The green in this bottom graphic, this is the main BNSF track that goes through Flagstaff. And then there's a couple other kind of spur tracks, the Camp Navajo Railroad line that goes along there. The red are tracks that have been abandoned. So we are not doing any kind of analysis on any of those abandoned tracks. Then the kind of the bigger graphic behind that shows the railroad tracks and then the crossings that are included in this SHRAP. There's a couple downtown, Ponderosa, Steves and Fanning ones, and then one out in the county in Cosnino. Are we missing any at-grade crossings in the Flagstaff area? Make sure our database is accurate.
I believe that's complete. This is Dave.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, just in the last few minutes I've got here, just wanted to kind of hear from you, your concerns about safety at specific locations, or maybe some systemic patterns that you've been noticing. Maybe hear some of your thoughts on what's been done in the past that may have helped, what could still be done in the future. What are some of the institutional challenges or technical challenges to improving safety? And how do we prioritize which rail crossings to improve first, because there's not enough funding to do everything that we'd like to get done. And I am aware there are several, or have been several fatalities at some of the crossings in Flagstaff, particularly the downtown ones. I know that can be a challenge if they're pedestrian related, for people either from a suicide or under the influence of something. But definitely would like to hear your thoughts on what are the issues you see, what can we do as we're putting this plan together to help improve safety at rail crossings in the Metro Plan area.
I'll just jump in. I can't find a raise hand function. Is there one? Anyhow, if someone figures it out, let me know.
Under reactions.
Reactions, under reactions. Thank you, Dave. So my only comment, Mike, and hello, by the way, how are you doing? Good to see you.
Yeah.
We lost you, Rick. Seems like you went to mute.
I went to mute. I tried to turn on my video. Struggling today, sorry. Yeah, I thought quiet zones should be listed here.
In a positive or negative way, or what's your thoughts there?
Neither, just a statement of fact. And then all the work that comes with a quiet zone in regard to the Department of Transportation's rail crossing inventories. Just a lot of data out there and facts that tie into all this, but I'm not answering any of your questions.
It's okay. It's a good start. We'll take it.
Yeah, this is Dave, Michael, and I just got to build on Rick's comment about quiet zones. We have, as part of our quiet zone installations, we have wayside horns at Steves and Fanning. Part of that was the geometric requirements could not be completely met. I think we're going to revisit that, and Rick can correct me if I'm wrong, but in those locations, we still have the kind of the offset arms just blocking the through movement. And so the possibility, we don't have the 4-quadrant gates. I don't know that I have a sense of which, if there's benefits to the 4-quadrant gates or not. I'm assuming there are. I'd love to see some data to compare that so we could make a determination. The other comment I'll make, is, some of the incidents that we have, as you referenced, may not be taking place exactly at the crossings, but may be entry points at the crossings. And I'm just wondering if there's any kind of longitudinal controls as opposed to lateral controls that might be considered to, keep people from wandering along the tracks or to discourage that.
I concur with both of those points. Many of the fatalities in Flagstaff, some of them may be suicide, but they do not occur at rail crossings. So in other words, there's a lot of trespassing that occurs in Flagstaff from BNSF's point of view. Well, BNSF Railway being specific to Flagstaff. And yeah, and again, thank you, Dave, for the discussion. The 4 quadrant gates are critical. So just a little bit of background. We were able to implement a quiet zone with adequate safety measures at Beaver and San Francisco, where the adequate safety measure was in fact one-way streets. So the one-way streets did not require us to swap out or add the 4 quadrant gates that Dave is talking about. And that would be, pole on each side of the crossing for each direction of traffic. So where there's one-way streets, there's only one direction of traffic. So you by nature don't end up with poles or crossing arms on the opposite side of the tracks from the direction of the traffic. This can be problematic in our downtown area with pedestrians and bikes. We have a little decorative gate, if you will, on the sidewalk and a red bar on the sidewalk that tells people where to stand. But there isn't a physical thing that keeps pedestrians from crossing the track when there isn't the 4 quadrant gates. So yeah, I don't know how much of that I want to add to this, because that could actually be perceived as a problem with our quiet zones that needs to be fixed. So I'm cautious bringing that up, but it's a good discussion.
Great, thank you.
Excellent. No, thank you, Rick. Thank you, Dave. I saw that Dan has had a first, then Ann, then Jeff. So Dan, go ahead. Go ahead first.
I'll go ahead and let Jeff Bauman go first, and then if I could go after Jeff, that'd be fine.
Okay, Jeff, go ahead.
All right. Sorry, I was slow getting in the meeting on a new computer here. So I would second most all of the discussion that Michael and Rick just had. I would say that pedestrian activity in the downtown area is probably seems to be, by the numbers and perception, to be our biggest issues in the Flagstaff area. Institution, I'm just going down your list and then I had something off the list. Institutional challenges to improving rail crossing safety. I've tried to kind of dive into section 130, working with ADOT folks and just trying to figure things out myself. And it seemed like the projects we were coming up with or things we were thinking about either weren't eligible or there wasn't support. I think some of that had to do with quiet zones. So more information on how locals can get involved in that program or what the program is even, or just some more information on that. That always seems to be a bit of a hurdle. It seems like a good resource. And I remember it because I've seen it in some of the summary literature on the recent infrastructure bill. It's out there again, and it sounded like maybe they've opened up eligibility a bit more than it used to be in the past. I know that'll take time to flow through, but that's maybe something specific. Back to your map, there's 2 crossings, one passive and one active that I don't see on here. And I don't know if they count. So you see the spur coming off of Ponderosa Parkway? Yes, we have an active crossing of that driveway to the city MRF. at Babbitt. It should show up in the inventories as Babbitt Way, Babbitt Drive. And then there's a passive crossing of the Y in downtown of, oh shoot, I should pull up a map. I think that's Eldon Street. Verify real quickly. I'm sorry, Cottage, kind of at the corner of Cottage and Eldon, across Cottage. I know I've been contacted by state railway folks about upgrading signs and markings there. So I think it's on someone's inventory.
Yeah, and are those both publicly owned roads, or are they driveways or private streets?
Cottage is publicly owned road. The other would be a driveway, but involves a public signal. So the crossing is across a driveway, but the signalized intersection is preempted.
Okay,
And that was going to the paper mill, which is in process of being demoed right now. So I'm sure that crossing is going to go away, but it's still there today.
okay, yeah, that Babbitt Drive one won't be part of what we're looking at because it is on a private facility, but it's good to note that it is kind of tied into the public stuff. But I'll look at the Cottage one and see why that one's not showing up in our database.
Okay. And that's all I have. I'll defer my time.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. And Dan, before I get to you, let me get to Ann first. Ann, the floor is yours.
Great. Hi. So just listening to conversation, definitely concur with everything the city is saying about, the quiet crossings and how they've worked to thread the needle and get that to work the last few years. I guess just going back to that list of questions you had, just generally, and I don't know if this is even something, I don't know how this planning process looks at growth of BNSF and the number of trains that we all know are happening now and then projected into the future, and if that influences the outcomes of what the solutions might be. But I just generally from a comment is, what could we be looking at pedestrian overpasses at a couple of key locations? And I understand, downtown, we're looking at potentially the Foots Trail going over near the City Hall and the future DCC project. But just looking at those as options in the future in Flagstaff, I would suggest that would be hopefully something that's considered long-term. And the other one kind of does relate to the DCC and how, the potential, maybe, and I don't know how this relates necessarily fully to the safety, pedestrian crossings, but of hazardous materials and preparation for, given the traffic of what's being carried on the trains, how is that worked into the safety of people standing near the tracks if there's an incident? So I'm just wondering how that plays into this planning process. I know that's not a capital solution, but that's more of a local response solution. Are we prepared as a community for incidents of that nature? And I think those were my only two comments. So thanks.
Thank you, Ann.
Excellent. Thank you, Ann. Dan, go ahead.
Great, thank you. So one of the issues, I wanted to let Rick and Jeff go first because they're really our technical experts and they work, every day with ADOT and BNSF on these issues. But, one of the things that we hear in the community and that's very confusing to the community are our quiet zones, right? So people understand the quiet zone downtown at Beaver and San Francisco. The train doesn't blow the horn unless the conductor sees somebody or something's dangerous and they blow it themselves from the train. But otherwise, there's no horns. You don't hear anything. And then the quiet zones on the east side are automated horns, right? And Rick has explained it to me. It has to do with the physical installations we made and everything. And I know just enough about this to be dangerous, but the neighborhood on the east side has said, well, we want the same quiet zone as downtown, right? And so I think BNSF has said, well, you're gonna have to make upgrades to those crossings, probably the 4 quadrants that Rick was talking about earlier, because those are two-way streets. But when we go to BNSF to talk about that, and that would be a good safety improvement no matter what, You know, they say, well, we're not going to consider that, I think, until we take care of the bigger issue of safety in Flagstaff. And so I think they've told the city that you need to come up with this safety plan, right? How are you going to reduce the accidents and incidents with cars and pedestrians and bikes? And so I'm wondering, I guess there's kind of a question in here. Is this plan going to help us with that? Is there a way to incorporate improvements and safety improvements at our crossings in this plan that'll help us maybe meet that with BNSF so that the city could potentially proceed with getting a different type of quiet zone on the east side? So that's number one. And Rick will correct me if anything I've said has changed, or if I've got it wrong. And then the second thing is, you know, we do hear all the time how Flagstaff has a higher rate of incident accidents and deaths and everything else than other communities that BNSF goes through. And so understanding why that is, I think would be helpful. I don't know if, you know, and this can be a sensitive issue, right? Because some of it is suicide, some of it is what I call serial inebriants, people who are just so out of it, they don't know where they are, they pass out on the tracks, whatever. That can be a very sensitive incident, a sensitive topic in this community. And even when we've had internal discussions about it, you know, we have to be careful. So, but understanding why we have this higher rate of accidents in Flagstaff would be great. Is it the volume of trains? Is it the number of people out and about? I mean, what is it? And so I don't know if this study is able to get down to that level or not. Why are we different than other communities? So those are my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Rick. I would have nothing to correct. You know, Dan mentioned that several times, so I just thought I'd add, Dan, you did a great job.
No, excellent. No, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Rick. Michael, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to that before we move on. If you can respond to those comments, please.
Yeah, those are all great comments. And, you know, I was just talking to BNSF earlier this week, and they were saying, yeah, the Flagstaff area is their highest rate of incidents in the whole like Western region, you know, not just Arizona, but even, you know, California and Nevada and things. And yeah, it is a complex kind of situation of what's going on there. I don't know that we're going to be able to solve everything, but we are coming up with a prioritization system and summarizing the inventory of the different crossings that are out there. And I can say from our preliminary work, it does look like several of the Flagstaff crossings are like in the top 20, but you're not the worst in terms of some of the other things going on in the Phoenix area in the Grand Avenue corridor in terms of total number of incidences, but the Flagstaff crossings do have the highest number of fatalities, and most of those are pedestrian related, and that is a challenge. So we will look to see what we can do to address that. I don't know if it's location specific or more of a systemic kind of thing with pedestrian behavior, but it's definitely a challenge. To Jeff's question on the section 130, that is one of the objectives that we're hoping to accomplish with this plan, is to provide some documentation on that section 130 program and kind of like a toolbox for what kinds of things might be eligible and might be, you know, good solutions for different types of issues that are going on there. And for pedestrian overpasses, Anne had mentioned, those are a great idea. At least in the past, section 130 money has not been able to be used for any kind of grade separation. So that's something that we definitely want to kind of explore and see what the opportunities are for doing some of those kind of grade separations. You know, if there are some other funding mechanisms, or that section 130 program can be modified slightly to incorporate that. On the safety plan that BNSF is asking for, that's interesting, because I have been involved in implementing some quiet zones, and you know, and technically the railroad doesn't have any say in what you do for quiet zone improvements, as long as you meet the guidelines with the quiet zone calculator and the FRA and Arizona Corporation Commission sign off on it. But I think we all know that they do have influence still, though, on FRA and the Arizona Corporation Commission, and they can make things difficult for local agencies if they want to. So it is a delicate balance to try to, you know, get their cooperation, but still meeting the city's goals, even, or county's goals, even though they may be different than the railroad goals on what to do sometimes. Trying to think if there's any other ones. Oh, on the longitudinal control, we may be able to look at that right at the crossing, but you know, definitely not like put up fencing for a half mile on, you know, either side of a crossing. I don't think we're going to get to that level of recommendation of things, but I know the railroad would like us to. But the Section 130 money cannot be used for those kind of improvements. Mr. Chair, looks like we got another hand raised from Rick.
Yes, from Rick. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I didn't want to back us up here. I just had two other thoughts while we're talking. And Michael, you probably have this all nailed. It's just, again, in the data or fact category. You know, our crossings are 2 tracks with the potential for a 3rd track coming. BNSF Railway is working, you know, I think currently working on adding a 3rd rail through Flagstaff. So that could become a reality at some point in time. And then the second point I have is speed of trains. Maybe speed of trains has something to do with our fatalities. You know, being the transcontinental line for BNSF Railway, that is something that's different than Phoenix. So I think rail speeds might be playing into that. And then going back to the comment on longitudinal, I would just ask if there's any way that Kimley Horn can push that issue for us. I would appreciate it, because, you know, there's a push between BNSF Railway and the city as to whose responsibility it is to put up that longitudinal fencing. So any help you guys can provide in this process would be appreciated, because I think longitudinal fencing would help a lot.
Yeah.
It's just who's supposed to put it up.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. I'm done.
Excellent. Thank you, Rick. Dan, your hand's up. Go ahead, Dan.
I just had a follow-up question on the quiet zone. So if the city wanted to improve a quiet zone, I mean, is it just a review by ADOT and meeting the ADOT standard, or is it ADOT and BNSF?
It actually goes more through FRA, Federal Railroad Administration. They have what's called a quiet zone calculator. And there's a website that you go on, and then you put in like adding quad gates, you know, for example, and see how does that change their kind of safety number. And you put in things like Rick was mentioning, like the speeds of the trains, the number of tracks, number of vehicles. So it kind of has a formula in there for some kind of a safety risk. And then you got to make sure whatever you're doing towards a quiet zone is above and beyond the value of the blowing horn, you know. So as long as you can show that it improves that safety compared to the horn, then you're allowed to not have the horn. You just need to notify ADOT and the railroad and the Arizona Corporation Commission. But yeah, so it's an interesting process. If you read the federal guidelines, the railroads like they can't like approve or disapprove of what you're doing, but they, at least my experience is they can definitely make it challenging though, and they're good at trying to get you to do a lot of improvements for them that aren't necessary, just so that you'll, you know, just so that the project will happen. You know, they've kind of figured that out. So.
I mean, you basically need their support. If they object to it, it's probably not going to get approved, is what I'm hearing. They being the railroad, BNSF.
Probably, yeah. But I mean, if push came to shove, though, you could do it without their approval. You know, as long as you can get Arizona Corporation Commission on your side. You know, and you're meeting all the federal requirements and things.
Yeah, and the term there, this is Rick, the term there, Michael, is diagnostic team, comes out of the FRA ruling. You have to establish a diagnostic team, which is comprised of all the people that Michael mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Also includes ADOT. ADOT keeps track of all the data associated with these crossings, which is what's happening here. This SHRAP. It's quite an intensive process. Mr. Falk, we'll get you involved next time. And yeah, modifying, trying to take down the wayside horns on the east side of town is actually quite complicated right now, because you got to reconvene the diagnostic team. You got to come up with supplemental safety measures that, you know, are going to allow you to go back to a true quiet zone situation, which in the case of Steves and Fanning means we need to put a median in, a raised median, like at Ponderosa Parkway. So the raised median with the offset gates, right? There's a gate on each side of Steves and Fanning for the direction of traffic. So the theory is if you're trying to cross the tracks and the gate comes down, you can actually use the opposite lane to still try to beat the train. So if you put in a raised median, it prevents vehicles from trying to drive around the gate. So it's either a raised median or you got to go with the 4-quadrant gates. 4-quadrant gates right now are estimated to be about $1 million at each crossing.
Yeah, no, Rick, I'm not trying to pull myself back into it. I know you and Jeff are on it. I'm trying to learn as much as anything. So thanks.
Fun stuff.
Yeah, I know.
And Michael, why I got you, I think another thing that happens in Flagstaff is there's the, even though there's signage up that says there's 2 tracks, I think some of the fatalities have been, you know, the first train clears and then people cross and get clobbered by the second train. I don't know how true that is. That may be anecdotal, but it kind of ties in with my previous comment about we're a multiple track crossing. Might be going to 3.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. I do have one more.
Excellent. No, fantastic comment. Oh, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead, Michael.
As you can say, I have one more slide, so I don't want to cut anybody off before I turn it back over to you. So we do have a survey that's out. It's just a fairly simple 6-question survey that is active. I encourage you to take it or send this on to anybody else that you think might want to take it. It's open to the public. Again, we're still in the data gathering phase right now, trying to make sure we're understanding the issues that are out there and how to help kind of come up with a prioritization scheme for making improvements in the future. We are looking to have that final document done by the February 14th deadline, and it might be 5 minutes before midnight that the day before. The ADOT was a little delayed in getting going on this compared to what they had hoped to due to some federal funding exchange issues on the bureaucracy side of things. So we're actually having to accelerate the schedule to get this done. So we are moving fairly quickly, but again, if you have any comments, we'd be happy to take those, you know, by the 24th. Thank you everyone for your input and time. I really appreciate it.
Excellent. No, thank you, Michael. That was fantastic and great comments. So really appreciate the presentation on that. All right. moving on to the next item on the agenda, item B, election of officers. Miles, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the TAC. It is that time of year again, as per the bylaws of MetroPlan. And I pasted the relevant sections into the staff report, 7.2.4. And then also Rosie attached a link to all of the bylaws for your reading pleasure. And I won't go through all of the details unless somebody on the TAC wants me to. Essentially, annually, we elect a chair and a vice chair, and it's a rotation basis. There's a preference that the chair and vice chair not be from the same organization, probably for obvious reasons, but it's by no means a requirement, because sometimes that's just the way it works. The people who are willing to serve are from the same organization. At this point, Nick Hall is chair, and I do want to recognize that Nick looks like he joined the meeting a little bit late, and Nick is no longer with the county, Coconino County, and he's with Burgess and Nyepel. And Jason James with ADOT is the vice chair. So Jason James is graciously chairing this meeting, and as you also know, there's a lot of moving parts here. Jason James was also promoted, and he is moving into a position that was formerly held by Dan Gabio. So Jason is probably not going to be in a position to continue to be chair or vice chair for a while. So at this point, what we're looking to do is elect a chair and a vice chair, and knowing that we might need to make, probably will have to make some changes, perhaps do another election before the year's up, depending on how staff positions evolve. And I will just say I've had discussions with Jason James and asked if he would be willing to step into the chair position, because there's just a often order of succession. Jason has graciously agreed to do that for a time being, until his successor in his current position is appointed. And I've also spoken with Andrew Iacona, who's back, and he represents NAU, to see if he would be willing to serve as vice chair. And mostly because I didn't want to just come into this meeting cold and say, who wants to step up. I also want to be really clear that I am not excluding anybody. There are so many people in this room have served before. Anyone who's willing to serve again, or even for the first time, is absolutely welcome. I know you all have a ton to do, and Dave and I and Rosie and now Mandia, definitely want to work to make your time commitments here as efficient as possible, and really not put a big drain on our chair and our vice chair. But they're critical positions to keep things rolling. So at this point, I'd like to turn it back to you, Chair James, to see if you could take us hopefully towards nominations and votes for these positions.
Okay, no, this is Jason. No, thank you for that. Appreciate that. So what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, Miles, is again just for the time being that I'll be the chair, and then Andrew will be the vice chair. Is that correct, or are we looking to officially boot me off of the chair position and look for anyone else on the TAC that's interested in being chair?
Thank you for asking for the clarification. An election, I think a vote needs to happen, and if the TAC votes the way you suggested, great, but there's also any other number of ways it might go where other people who are in the room want to volunteer, or that perhaps somebody wants to nominate somebody. And I think that's kind of the discussion we need to have. Are there volunteers or other nominations that anybody wants to put forward? And then hopefully an election.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you for that answer. I appreciate that, Miles. So I guess the first question I will put out to the TAC then is, even though I am more than willing to be the interim chair for now, to keep things going until until I backfill my position, is anyone else on the TAC interested in being the chair? I guess I'll put that question out first. And I'm hearing the crickets right now.
Either everyone's on mute or you don't have competition.
No, it's all good. It's all good. No, I don't mind being the interim chair for the meantime, because it's going to be a little while before my position is backfilled. Not probably until February and March. By that point, I'll be, like I said, almost to the end of my of my duration anyway. So yeah, so I guess I'll go to the second thing then. So again, the recommendation to the task is I will stay as the chair, and Andrew will be the vice chair. And so with that said, I guess I will look for a motion on that, unless anyone objects. But if no one objects, looking for a motion to approve myself as chair and Andrew as vice chair.
This is Rick, so moved.
Thank you, Rick. Looking for a second.
Zan, I'll second.
Thank you, Ann. All in favor, say aye.
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 And all opposed? Motion carries. Think we're good with that, Miles. So excellent. Unless there's any other further comments from Metro Plan staff, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Regional item C, Regional Transportation Plan update. Dave, the floor is yours, sir. Nope, I think you're still muted, Dave.
It's amazing. You just get all excited to jump in there and forget to hit that little button. So quick update on the regional transportation plan. You can see the staff report, have it broken out by task from the RFP, from the proposal. So in short, we're on schedule and budget. Our literature review is complete. The trend analysis is underway. I will note that we are coordinating with the regional plan staff at the city and the county and producing what they're calling regional snapshots. There's going to be about 30 of them on a variety of topics, and we're handling transportation and some economic stuff. Would encourage you all to go to their YouTube site and take a look. There's a bunch of 15-minute videos that are being produced. The regional model update, we're moving from the 2017 base year to 2019 just to get that up to speed using building permit data and any network changes, just so we're as current as possible. We have a set of 2019 traffic counts that will assist with that. I'll go ahead and put in a call. We need some data from Mr. Ince. So anything that the TAC can do to help make that happen would be greatly appreciated. As far as the scenarios are going, that's really, we have a methodology that's been agreed to for the development of those scenarios. But that's really later in the process, starting really towards the first of the year. Public participation, task 5, is moving along fairly well. A couple things to report on. Appreciate everybody's help on the random sample survey and moving that forward. The field work is underway, and the report as of this morning, of the 800 surveys we're looking to complete, we're about halfway there. The majority of those are happening in the city, or are available from the city. We're also looking for 400 from the county area of the MPO. That's going a little bit more slowly. We've also recruited some champions to help us get the word out. We put out, invitation to about well over 200 people, and we've got 50 that have signed up, and so we're encouraged there. We'll continue to reach out. And many on that list of 200 will be stakeholders whom, whether they're champions or not in terms of getting the word out, they'll still be engaged as stakeholders. I want to thank those of you who from the TAC who've signed up on the champions list for your participation. We've had a really good branding meeting on Monday of this week, and expect to see some output from that. Just a brief comment on the Regional Transportation Plan Advisory Group. There's been a lot of solid discussion and some disagreement within the group. Some concerns about the process. Want to note that a meeting was held with some sustainability members from that group yesterday, and I think we've resolved a lot of the issues, many of which were not surprising, just from kind of miscommunication, making sure that we have been talking past each other, but got on the same page on a large number of issues, and I think we have some clarity on how to move forward. So that's very encouraging, I believe, for the success of the process. That's really all I have for the update. I will defer to Miles to see if he has anything that he would like to add, since he's been pretty heavily involved in is running the advisory group. Miles?
Thank you, Dave. And Mr. Chairman, members of the TAC. I do appreciate the opportunity to share a bit of the community relations and maybe even political backdrop to how this is playing out. And as we knew going in, and we've discussed since probably for every meeting for a year, Metro Plan is wanting to be very, very responsive to the climate emergency that the city declared, to the carbon neutrality plan, and at the same time be very responsive to or accountable to our mandate, which is to put together a fiscally constrained plan. And this discussion that's captured in the last paragraph of the staff report that's up on the screen, speaks to this idea that some members of the sustainability community on the Regional Transportation Plan Advisory Group said, look, we really want you to make scenario one as sustainable as possible, and commit to doing that. And I felt like I needed to be really clear that, my job is to be as accountable to the voters as possible first, and then we will make it as sustainable as possible after that. And for the members of the city who are in the room, I'm going to say this, and you'll probably hear me say it many times again. It's not Metro Plan's place to try to be the city attorney, to be really blunt about it. The city needs to make any real interpretations of what kind of flexibility exists within Prop 419 and 420. So I do believe there are probably some things we can do that are extremely safe in terms of making things as sustainable as possible. But my intention at this point with scenario one is to, if there's any doubt, we need to meet the spirit and intent of 419 and 420 and the projects that were promised to the voters. So it'll be very critical to get the input of this TAC to make sure that as the plan comes forward that we're doing that. The other thing I want to say, and then maybe open it up for discussion, if we could, Mr. Chairman, is this concept of scenario two. And as the effort has unfolded, as it's developed a bit more, what we're looking at is going to the public the first time and sharing scenario one, which is, this is what the voters asked for. This is the current land use pattern. We build this out, and here are the impacts on emissions and vehicle miles traveled, and a couple of other performance benchmarks. And kind of like the status quo plan, And maybe there's a better term for it than status quo, because it's a lot of change. There's a lot of construction within that plan. But then scenario 2 was to look at, an enhanced sustainability scenario. And I think what we're looking at here, and I hope I'm saying this clearly for the TAC, and I'm communicating well, is that scenario 2 will really provide tools and options and other ways things might be done that the Metro Plan wants to kind of open up innovation there and open up discussion, so that if there's anything that seems rich and appropriate, maybe the community wants to run with that somehow. Maybe some of it gets captured in the plan. So I don't know exactly how it'll play out, because what we want to do is kind of set the table to have this really robust discussion, and then we'll see where that discussion leads us. So I think that's it, and I'd like to, answer any questions or open it up for discussion if I could, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. Thank you, Miles. Thank you, Dave, for that. I appreciate that. I want to open the floor, as Miles is saying. I'd like to open the floor to any of our TAC members. Any additional comments, questions, or anything in regards to the update? Rick, I see your hands up. Go ahead. Oh, Rick, I think you're still muted.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
There you
go. So I wanted to address the point that Mr. Mildbeck made in regard to the city attorney and some review that we need in regards to what is the standing of 419 as approved by the voters, and how far can we flex that and stay legal, if you will. That work is underway. I'm not prepared to share that with the TAC at this point in time, but be glad to do so in the future. But very important point that has been made. We're being asked right now, we've got some policies that are conflicting. The Active Transportation Management Plan, which is not yet adopted, and the city's carbon neutrality plan, which has been adopted, are pushing strongly towards prioritizing bike and ped movements, and even to the point of lane diets, if you will, or the concept of induced demand, that if you build it, they will come. So the carbon neutrality plan is pushing hard for a VMT reduction, actually not a reduction, but just simply to hold it steady from 2019 levels into 2030. So, that kind of is a reduction based on, our typical growth rate that we normally see. So a lot of tension built into the system right now, and we are working on that legal advice that I'd be glad to, not provide legal advice, but what I'm working on is a series of talking points that I think will help us all, be prepared when our citizens ask us or family members ask us, how are we reconciling the tensions between these policies? I'll be able to share that in the future here. I'm not committing to a time frame yet, but I'm working on it currently. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you, Rick. Appreciate that. Appreciate those comments. Any additional comments or questions from the TAC on this regional transportation plan update? Going once? Going twice? Hearing none? All right. So we'll move on to item D, the mini grant consideration. Miles, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the TAC. So recommendation here that mini grant funds from fiscal year 2022 be directed to an IGA or a contract with the City of Flagstaff Sustainability Program for an amount not to exceed $100,000. And the staff report went out, and I'm going to go through, kind of leads you down a logical path to a place that hopefully you're comfortable with when we get there. And if not, we'll talk about it. So we've got a couple items in our work plan that this ties to. and certainly just keeping the mini grant program going is one of them. And then the other is this idea of vehicle miles traveled and, maintaining levels at 2019 levels. So this is the second year of our mini grant program. And the whole idea of it is to support transportation projects of the member agencies, so a small project can be more readily completed. And we did released a notice of funding opportunity. It was open through the month of October. That notice is attached here for your reference in the packet if you want to take a look at it. And we received one application this year from the sustainability program at the city of Flagstaff. And it's very interesting. When this came in, I really had to sit with it for a bit because there are so many ties in what the grant proposal submits that are so closely tied to the work Metro Plan was already doing with the regional transportation plan. So given the ties, such as the sustainability project proposing education of transportation staff and other partner agencies, that really ties closely to our robust public participation process and what we do here, with this group already as the technical advisory committee. But the grant proposal is to take that a bit, I guess, ramp that up a bit and really focus on tools for measuring impacts on vehicle miles traveled and carbon emissions. So given that we're in the midst of updating our regional transportation plan, and we're doing this public information effort, and it includes a lot of input of technical staff and transportation staff, it seems to me to recognize that connection and really kind of try to find some synergy here with the energy that exists. So for example, if Metro Plan were just to say, okay, here's the grant, go do your thing, I think there's just too much risk that the efforts would not be coordinated. There might be mixed messaging. They might even sometimes, if there's disagreement, be in competition. And given how important the regional transportation plan is to this organization, I don't want to take that risk. I want to do the best thing we can to maximize, coordination. So what I'm thinking here, and want to get the tax feedback, is that if we turn this into a contract or intergovernmental agreement approach with specific deliverables, if we say things have happened even since we did our scope of work for ERTP, and we think we can do more, and we think the work sustainability wants to do is really consistent with our overall effort, we can capture that work and then really engage, the energy and the talents of that group in making our transportation plan and communication plan to the public even better than it would have been otherwise. So that's why I'm recommending that we explore doing a contract rather than a grant. And if there's support for this approach, my next steps would be to look at these administrative tools for doing a contract. And maybe it's an IGA, maybe it's a memorandum of understanding, maybe it's some other mechanism that we would need to look into. And I would be bringing some of those things back as next steps. But first, I really wanted to share this with the TAC and see what your sense of it all was. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No, thank you, Miles. I really appreciate that. All right, so let me open the floor to the TAC on this. Any comments, questions, concerns about the staff recommendation for the mini grant fund? Go ahead, Dan. I see your hands up.
Yeah, I guess I always envisioned these funds as going into the capital projects and actually building things. All we hear about is what a shortage of funding we have to do bicycle, pedestrian, transit projects. So I realize that's on the member agencies for not responding to the call for projects, but I I guess this is not the kind of project I had anticipated the grant would fund. So I guess I haven't thought that through yet, so.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond to that?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I probably to be complete here, I put up on the screen the fiscal impact, but more directly, the alternatives. And, you know, you could say that the TAC thinks it through and suggests that we go ahead with the approach that I recommended. The TAC could also say, you know what, for whatever reason, we're going to recommend that you just do it as a grant. And then the other one is you could recommend that we not award the funding and we reopen the grant process. We only received one application for this year's round of funding, and we could choose to reopen it. But clearly I can't, and I wouldn't award money to another project unless we, you know, reopened it like you did a position, you know, if you wanted to find a larger pool of candidates. Thank you.
Thank you, Miles. Ann, go ahead. See your hands up.
Thanks. No, Dan, I appreciate your comment about the original idea of the mini grant was for a more of a traditional capital type project. And maybe I'll just, number one is it is, and which sounds strange, given the value, it is actually kind of hard sometimes to find a project that you can complete within this type of a potential budget. But I have to say, from Mountain Line's perspective, we just weren't prepared this year to be able to have a viable project that we knew we could complete. We had thought of a bus stop project or a pedestrian crossing park project, which would have required coordination with the city on, and just given our staff resource capacity, and also we hadn't put this into this FY22 budget from a local match standpoint, so we would have had to done some shifting there. So so given some of those reasons, we opted not to put together an application. But I guess to this item on the table right now is the way my understanding was what city sustainability was proposing was really this is a toolkit of sorts to help do some of the calculations, some of the technical know-how type work. If that's my understanding of what the proposal was, and I understood there was some training as well. So I like the idea because we have these, you know, great planning documents, you know, the city's carbon neutrality plan that was passed, this RTP that eventually will be updated and soon adopted. So we're going to have to figure out the how, right, of the implementation pieces. And that's always where challenging going from high level planning to implementation. And I feel like from the carbon neutrality side, this type of support tools would be really helpful for not just the city, but other agencies meet their goals as well. So overall, I'm supportive of the type of project that the city sustainability has put forward. And I actually do like Jeff's recommendation on the approach of the delivery of maybe the relationship is more of an IGA because of the integrated nature of, you know, these complex analysis pieces that, you know, would go into the vehicle miles traveled and having that input from, you know, MetroPlan and the other stakeholders into what the city is developing as a deliverable, I think would be really, would be more beneficial to all the partners in the community. So I like the idea of maybe it's not necessarily a grant, you know, per se delivered that way, but it is under an IGA with the funding, you know, the support for the city's toolkit coming from these funds, and then really clearly outlining what each role, you know, the partners have in developing the toolkit. I think it's a good approach. So I'm actually supportive, I guess, of alternative one, I believe is what it is. Sorry, I'm looking at. So, thanks.
Thank you, Ann. Really appreciate that. Any further comments on this from anyone on the TAC in regards to this the mini grant consideration? Go ahead, Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder if there's any interest from partner agencies for option 3. I mean, is it fair to kind of do a polling right now? County, NAU, Mountain Line, I mean, throw the city in there. If number 3 happened, would there be any more interest than there was in the first round? And again, I wonder, Mr. Chair, if that's a question you might want to take a poll on.
No, that's a great idea, Rick. And before I take a poll on that, I just want to hear any comments or response from MetroPlan first before I put that out to the TAC. So Miles, Dave, if you have any comments on that.
Thank you. I'll start, and then, Dave might have some things to say. I put this option in here because it really is. It's one of the alternatives that could be pursued. I will tell you, even if the TAC said to me, that the vote came out a majority, that you thought this was a pretty good idea and you'd like us to do it, I would really have to sit with that and think carefully about what I ultimately recommended to my board. For reasons you can probably understand, we went through a process. It was open. We got an eligible application as per our criteria, and to not accept it, I just don't know if that feels right, for lack of a better way of saying it. So I absolutely want to hear what you think, and I want to hear the case to be made for doing that, and I want to consider it carefully. And then ultimately I'll need to make a recommendation to my board, and then they need to decide, how we move forward. And I know Dave might have something.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Miles. Dave, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I have nothing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. Thank you. Andrew, I see your hands up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you, Mr. Chair. Wanted to echo the sentiment that Ann shared of the value. One of the reasons NAU did not pursue this was partly in result of the time we had to go after it, but also the value. We get very little done for this amount of money aside from things like studies and further analysis. So actual capital projects, I couldn't come up with much besides crosswalk painting, which we had just done. So I think it's a matter of the mini grant and then capital projects. There's not a whole lot that can be done in this value range.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew, for that comment. Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I do think Rick's question is a really important one. If we were to recommend number 3, understanding the board may not agree with that recommendation, would there be projects that would come forward that didn't before? And so, I'll take ownership for not having to talk with Rick ahead of this meeting to coordinate that. And I know Rick and his program is like everybody else. They're underwater right now. They're being asked to do so many things. They're just trying to keep up. And so applying for grants is hard. It's a hard thing to do, to find time sometimes. But I do have a question also for Dave. So this proposal that came from sustainability, how would this tool fit in with things you're working on in the RTP? Would it help kind of further some things that you're anticipating coming out of the RTP?
Thank you, Dan, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I would see this as an implementation tool. As you know, ideas and plans coming out of MetroPlan are not formal policy. They need to be adopted by our member agencies for implementation. And where in the RTP, as Miles indicated earlier, we're going to be developing and evaluating a series of tools and what their impacts would be on VMT reduction. What this would do is actually develop the process for analyzing those. I would expect, and I think there's a little clarity that I need from sustainability, that this would influence the transportation impact analysis process. Right now, the process is largely based on level of service and resolving level of service. There are processes in California and other places that now focus on vehicle miles of travel. And so part of what I think is the outcome of this is to develop those tools and toolboxes for adoption by the city. And I think that would be directly implementing things I would expect coming out of the RTP.
I
So
was
thank you
kind
for
of
the question.
wondering, yeah, no, thanks for that. I was kind of wondering as I was reading the proposal again, if it is a little ahead of policy, although it does feel like this is where the policy is heading. And it's a huge shift in the way we do transportation planning and everything else. But it's
It
a shift
is.
but it's a shift that, you know, is called for with the climate emergency. So that, I mean, our sustainability team is also being asked to do something that they've said is, you know, nearly impossible within 10 years. So they need to be aggressive. And so, yeah.
Yeah, so you know, just a reflection back on the scenarios. It's you know, as I see it, and I think it's in keeping with what Miles has suggested, is and it's like the status quo plan shows us, you know, yes, this is policy adopted by voters, both land use and 419, but it only gets us so far to the new policy, which is carbon neutrality. And scenario 2 is going to be, yeah, let's throw everything in the kitchen sink to get us, you know, at this, to get us to those carbon neutrality goals. And the city is going to need some kind of tool, which I think this grant would develop, to put those things into play.
I'd like to respond to Dan's point as well, Mr. Chair. Because I think I heard, how does this, you know, tie in, and is it maybe ahead of policy? And if I heard that correctly, I would say, since we have adopted as Metro Plan, finding a way to maintain vehicle miles traveled at 2019 levels, I think there's reason to say that it does fit with where we are currently directed to go.
Excellent. No, thank you. Thank you for that. All right. Any other further comments or anything from anyone on attack in regards to this mini grant consideration? Okay, hearing none, this is what I'm going to do. And Miles, let me know if this is okay. What I'm going to do on this particular item, since we've kind of heard some different perspectives on which alternatives the Metro Plan TAC wants to proceed with, I'm going to go member to member. And when I call your name, just let me know which alternative you would be supportive of. So I just want to see if we have a majority for any one of the alternatives. And if we have a tie, then we'll go back and talk a little bit more. So unless anyone has any objection to that, let me start with Rick. Rick, which alternative would you go with?
I would support number 1. I think that the FMPO Metro Plan has come up with a very creative way of handling this oddball grant application. So number 1, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Rick. Ann?
Alternative 1.
Thank you. Andrew?
Alternative 1.
Thank you, sir. Jeff?
Number 1.
Number 1. Excellent. Dan?
I'll support number 1.
Excellent. Thank you. And I will also support number 1. And Ed, do you have any thoughts on these alternatives?
No, I choose to abstain. Involved in specific funding conversation.
Understood. All right. I think we have unanimous for alternative number 1. So with that said, looking for a motion to go with the staff recommendation of directing the fiscal year 22 mini grant fund to an intergovernmental agreement or contract with the City of Flagstaff Sustainability Program for amount not to exceed $100,000.
So moved. This is Anne.
Motion by Ann, looking for a second.
I'll second that. This is Dan.
Dan seconds. All right, alternative one goes through. Thank you very much, and thanks for that conversation. Appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman.
All right, moving on. Go ahead, Miles.
I was gonna say, just a point of order. I'm sorry, it just, I mean, you took it so far. Would you just do a vote and we can finalize it, please?
Yep. Or were you asking, Miles, were you just asking for a vote just now, or?
Yeah, no, you kind of took a vote and then you did a motion in a second, so that's fine. We'll just go with that and I'll move on to the next item.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Yeah, I was just trying to streamline it for you. All right, let's go to item E, the Executive Board Agenda Review. Miles, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the TAC. So the Executive Board meeting is 2 weeks from today. And we will do an election of officers just like we did for the TAC. There is a Q1 financial report, and I'm just very briefly going to pop that up on the screen. I hope, give me 1 second here. And to show you that, you know, revenues are budgeted at 1.8 million. We're at 376,000. And if you go and look at expenses with our projected budget, we budgeted 492,000 for salaries. We're underspent because it took us a while to find Mandia and bring her on board. So we got a little bit of vacancy savings there. Operating budget is tracking, travel budget is tracking, and there's the 5,055. It looks like we spent half of the budget in the first quarter, and we actually need to correct that. And then projects are underspent, and that's pretty typical. We budget everything we possibly can, and then it sometimes takes a while to get momentum going on these projects, as I'm sure most people in the room know. But overall, I can say we're definitely, you know, we're tracking to budget. We're certainly not at risk of overspending our budget. And my intention is just to share that with the board and keep rolling. And unless there are questions, I'll just go back to the executive board agenda, Mr. Chair. And the next item is to give a federal and state funding update. And I will tell you that I am diving into the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. There's so much there, and it's such an amazing opportunity for us and for everybody. And it remains to be seen the details of the programs and how money is going to be distributed. And one of the really interesting parts of this that we actually discussed in a meeting with some members of city staff today has to do with the money that's distributed by formula. And a lot of the discretion or interpretation of how formula funding is distributed is going to go, it seems, through ADOT. So we're going to need to be engaged in those discussions in the analysis, and maybe do some of our own and be prepared to make a case to ADOT as to how we think, you know, distribution should happen. So since we're so small, we're going to be partnering with the Rural Transportation Advocacy Council, and hopefully 10 small urban and COG organizations will have one voice and be able to say, we've all looked at it and we're kind of thinking it goes this way. And I just don't want to take for granted, since the bill is so complicated, that it's all just going to be fine. I feel like, we really need to be engaged and make sure that the funding that seems like it's due to us, we're clear and we pursue. So that includes formula funding and how those formulas are interpreted, as well as competitive funding pools that have come in, and there are many different programs. So next time the TAC meets, I want to be able to come in with a more detailed presentation on having gone through the bill and sharing more specific details on how I think we might be able to move forward and pursue funding that fits different projects. The other thing has to do with the state transportation funding. And I think you all know, MetroPlan is working with the other small urban areas in COGS. There's 10 of us, and we're putting forth through the Rural Transportation Advocacy Council, we're putting forth a $50 million request statewide of state general fund, budget surplus, essentially. And 2.6 million of that total request would come to MetroPlan. And we've gone through a process here, you might recall, just last month, where we identified the Lone Tree Corridor as the appropriate project for that funding. So that process continues. And I think that concludes my report on federal and state funding update. Just want to see if there's any questions or comments about that before I move on, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. Thank you for that report, Miles. Really appreciate that. Any questions, any comments in regards to the executive board agenda review update?
I've got more on that agenda. I was pausing for this item since it was so weighty.
Oh, okay, my bad. Okay, gotcha. Okay, so I didn't hear any comments or anything. So go ahead and proceed, Miles.
Okay. The next two are much simpler. The 2022 meeting venue. I will tell you, my anticipation, unless somebody in the room wants to object, is that we keep running TAC meetings virtually. It just saves everybody time. It's more convenient, and we do it that way. However, the board has had a discussion, and I'm bringing back to them some options, and they might want to do hybrid meetings, and they might want to move the location. So I'm going to have a discussion with them about it. And again, I'm just assuming TAC members are okay with us continuing these meetings virtually. And if somebody doesn't like that, maybe contact me offline, and we can certainly revisit it. And then the next item is the mini grant consideration. I will share with the board the recommendation we just got from all of you. And the next two items from the executive director, transportation planner, will be introducing Mandia Gonzalez, and this Sunshine Transport Corporation Solutions Steering Committee. I don't have anything to update you with on that right now, and I don't know if I will in 2 weeks either, but that's a potential. And that concludes my report.
Excellent. Thank you. Any comments, any questions from the TAC on this update? And hearing none, we'll move. Oh, go ahead, Rick. I see your hands up.
Yeah, it took me a minute to find the icon. I put the chat box over it. It's always something, Sorry about that, Mr. Chair, and thank you. I just would say I'm interested in a hybrid approach as well, kind of going back a couple items on the executive board agenda there, Jeff Meilbeck. But that's just my opinion. Again, I'd be interested in hybrid if the technology's there. If it isn't, maybe we could borrow a conference room here at City Hall. It's getting pretty cool. We got a couple of conference rooms that are well equipped for the hybrid approach. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rick. Any other comments or anything? So before we move on to item F, Miles, I got my my booster shot, so I'm ready for the hybrid too if that comes up. So,
Okay,
all right. So, yeah. So moving on to item F, items from the executive director. Miles, floor is yours.
thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the TAC. Actually, my name should not be on here because I'm going to defer right to David Wessel.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Miles. Just to alert the TAC to the fact that the state freight plan update is underway. I believe they're in kind of fact finding and stakeholder outreach. They've had a couple meetings. It's a fairly robust group with both railroads and several trucking firms represented, as well as many shippers and government agencies and groups like Metro Plan and engaged on the technical advisory committee. And this is relevant. I don't believe we have anybody from the county here, but the county has received a grant to explore industrial development out of Camp Navajo. And as some of you may recall, in times past, we've looked at an intermodal yard out there, which may be part of that conversation and wrap into the state freight plan discussions. So just want to bring that to everybody's attention. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave. And Rick, I see your hand still up. Is that up from the last agenda item, or did you have a comment?
My bad, Mr. Chair, it's coming down. Sorry.
Okay, just wanted to double check. No problem. And going to what Dave mentioned about the Safe Freight Plan, I believe the next technical advisory committee meeting for the Safe Freight Plan will be beginning of December. I believe that within the next week and a half, that meeting invite should go out. So Dave, just let me know if you don't receive that meeting invite within the next week and a half. Let me know. I'll make sure that you're that you receive that invite.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, unless there's any other comments, we'll move on to item G, future agenda items. Miles, the floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, members of the TAC, I'm open for requests or suggestions for things we need to put on the next agenda.
Sure, I'll jump in. This is Jason. I'll jump in. I know for January 26th, we finally have the escalation decision meeting for the Milton US 180 corridor master plan early next week, I think Monday morning. So once that escalation decision meeting has concluded, I'm going to make it a high priority to do final review of the plan, budget closeout. So as part of that, Mr. Director, you can put me on the agenda for January 26th to do that presentation that I was supposed to do a few months ago. So go ahead and you can put that there for the final presentation on the corridor master plan for US 180 and Milton.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Excellent. So going on to closing business items from the committee, let me open the floor to anybody on the TAC that has any general announcements, any items of concern, or anything to report on. I will open the floor. Anyone to have anything to report at this time?
Nothing from me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Rick.
Okay. Thank you, Rick. Anybody else? Floor is open. Just want to make sure that they have anything to report. Going once? Going twice?
Yeah.
And hearing none, the next scheduled meeting will be next year, January the 26th, 2022 at 1:30 p.m. And since we're not going to meet during the holiday season, I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all of you and to all your families. So Enjoy your holiday season and look forward to speaking with you again in January. And with that said, I will adjourn the meeting at 3:06 p.m. Thank you.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Wow, it's that time of year. Wow.
Thanks all. Take care.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Drew, for serving as vice chair, and Jason for your ongoing leadership.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Take care.
All right. Take care.
Bye.